Super wildcard weekend is here. We have a great slate of games ahead of us. The two teams which needed buys due to health got them. And now we are set for some phenomenal football. 6 games of excellence. Well, 5 games and whatever one the Broncos were. Starting things off, Denver is taking on the Bills at Buffalo, and you know my opinions on the Broncos, their quarterback situation, their head coach, a charlatan if there ever has been one. McDermott is going to expose this Broncos offense. We've got 3 Chuck E. Cheese touchdowns through the air against a depleted Chiefs defense who is resting starters. That's not going to happen this week. They're not going to blow the doors off the Bills defense. It's going to be a low-scoring game for Bo Nix. I'm thinking 1 touchdown, 2 picks, maybe a fumble here or there. Relatively inefficient performance, 65% completion percentage, but those balls really aren't going anywhere. On the other side, the tough test is going to be for Josh Allen to find success through the air against this Broncos defense. They've got phenomenal pass rush, particularly from the interior with Zach Allen, a very underrated defensive tackle. Could have been a defensive player of the year candidate if not for the position he played. Is he going to be able to find Amari Cooper, Khalil Shakir, Keon Coleman? And the third one, I think, is a big yes. Keon Coleman is going to have a big day. He is physically bigger and has more explosive power than anyone in that Broncos secondary. Man-to-man, he is going to be hard to cover in these cold weather conditions, and he is going to find his spots and pick them well, get those jump balls, those 50-50 balls, secure them for the Bills, and help them march down the field. The Bills obviously have the better running game with James Cook, 1,000-yard rusher, atop the NFL in rushing touchdowns. Their tight ends, much better than the Broncos, and I think it's pretty clear Josh Allen, different stratosphere than any offensive player the Broncos have to offer. So I've got the Bills winning. I think it'll be kind of close because the weather's bad. It's going to be low scoring, maybe like a 25-15 type game. But it's going to be one side. The Bills are winning this one.
The Bills have the better quarterback, the deeper wide receiver room, the more dynamic running back, the better offensive line. They're better across the board on the offensive side of the ball. Maybe you're a little bit skeptical about the Bills' defense with some of the showings we've seen from them recently. They haven't exactly been world beaters this year, but their offense has been. I mean, we saw them put 48 points up on the Lions, 42 points up, albeit in a loss against the Rams, 30 points up on the Chiefs in a win. So they have beat good teams this year. The Broncos, on the other hand, haven't exactly been beating great teams this year. Bo Nix's games have been completely up and down. Him having a good game against Chiefs backups does not move me in the slightest. And I don't think he, in Buffalo, on the biggest stage, he's going to live up to that and do enough to overcome what Josh Allen is going to do on the other side of the field, also after a full week of rest.
Yeah, we saw Bo Nix perform in college at Auburn, the biggest moments in the Iron Bowl. We saw him perform against Washington twice when he had that super Oregon team, that talented squad who should have been in the playoffs, particularly in the Pac-12 championship. He's not that guy. He's not going to rise to the moment. He's going to get outplayed just like he did by Michael Penix by Josh Allen, a superior quarterback, a superior slinger of the pigskin. Bouncing on over to the NFC, the 7 seed taking on the 2 seed should be a bit more interesting. The Eagles are hosting the Green Bay Packers, a team who played them very close in Brazil earlier in the year. Obviously, this is when Jordan Love popped his kneecap out of socket, started Green Bay slow on the season. Well, could have started him a little bit slower. Malik Willis stepped up, played admirably, and kind of put them in a weird spot. Now, they're taking on the Eagles again with home field advantage, and I think it's going to go about the same. I think this is going to be a relatively high-scoring game. In recent weeks, we have seen this Eagles defense get lit up. Admittedly, I think Jaden Daniels is a little better than Jordan Love, but if a talented quarterback who can sort of shake a little bit steps on the field, their defense starts taking steps back. Their secondary has not played well in the final month of the season. I think it's going to get lit up by the deep Packers receiving room unless Christian Watson just cannot play. Josh Jacobs is going to find success on the outside of the line of scrimmage. I doubt he's going to be able to get much going against Jalen Carter and those linebackers on the interior, but I think the Packers offense scores points. On the other side of the ball, though, their front 7 is sorry. The Eagles are running all over with Saquon Barkley. There's a reason they rested him in the final week of the season and chose not to chase Eric Dickerson's all-time rushing record. It's so they could give him the ball 35 times against the Packers in round 1 of the playoffs. He is going to have a monster day statistically. Land, air, and sea. He is going to run it. He is going to catch it. He may throw a few. He may take some inspiration from Cam Scatterbo in that playoff game and sling one deep to Devontae Smith or A.J. Brown. He is going to get going offensively. He is going to carry this offense to a crispy 32 points. It's going to be too much for Green Bay. Maybe some of the Eagles receivers get involved. Maybe Jalen Hurts bounces back from his concussion, although I really think they're going to try not to use him too much. 12, 14, 15 attempts from him at max, and the Eagles are pulling away and winning this one.
I have lost faith in the Packers almost every single week as the season has progressed. They haven't beat one playoff team this year, with the exception of the Rams, who at the time that they played them were severely hampered by injury, and they only beat them by 5 points in that matchup. In the NFC North, they've a whopping 1 win against the rest of their division. They have not had a great year, they haven't had a spectacular year, and I don't think they have enough offensive firepower to put up a lot of points on this Eagles defense that has only gotten better as the season has progressed. The only thing that I could maybe see where you're like, the Packers have a little bit of an advantage is that Jalen Hurts hasn't played the last couple weeks. Maybe you think he's going to be a little bit rusty, but to speak to your point, they just rested Saquon Barkley, and they're going to combat maybe some of Jalen Hurts' rust with Saquon Barkley taking over the game and dominating on the ground with how good they are from a rushing perspective. So I agree. I don't think the Packers stand that much of a chance in Philadelphia. They haven't shown an ability to beat good teams all year long, and I think the Eagles win.
You're being too kind and giving Green Bay a little bit too much credit, in my opinion. You mentioned the 1-5 in division there. They should not be 1-5 in division. They should be 0-6 in division. We saw that Bears-Packers game ended the first time with that blocked kick. That is a freak occurrence. That is a Chuck E. Cheese win. This team is not performing in the biggest moments against their rivals, and that is going to continue.
The Ravens-Steelers. I just had a hit piece go out, making Steelers fans finally realize that they're not all that great of a team. Over the last 4 weeks, their defense has been pitiful, and I don't think they stand much of a chance. They're giving up over 27 points a game over this little losing streak that they've had. On the offensive side of the ball, the Russ we expected to see heading into the season has reared his head a little bit. They haven't been able to move the ball, and against this Ravens team over the course of their 2 matchups this season, they've scored a whopping 2 touchdowns. They're really only kicking field goals. Luckily for them, they have the best kicker in the NFL this season. And with what the Ravens did last time, sticking to just Derrick Henry dominating the Steelers' front 7, Lamar Jackson feeding off of that, what the Steelers have going on in the secondary and what their pass defense has been looking like, they do not stand much of a chance. Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry, they're going to put up 30 points again, and we know this Steelers offense cannot sniff 20 points.
I mean, it's a little Jekyll and Hyde with the Steelers offense. Some days they have it, some days they don't. Kind of the same way with the Ravens defense. Some days they have it, some days they don't. Recently, the Ravens defense has realized, oh, wait a second, we've got 3 or 4 all-pro level players. How about we lock in here a second and actually stop teams from scoring at will on us? They've been much better in the final month of the season and the second half than they were to start the year. But if that start of the year defense rears its head, suddenly you've got ourselves a game. Mike Williams made a pretty big catch down the sideline for the Steelers last week. Other than that, their offense did nothing. Najee Harris, nothing. Russell Wilson, nothing. George Pickens came to the game with 900 yards, looking for a 1,000-yard season, left the game with 899 yards. A bad showing all around. Now, I don't think it's going to be quite as lopsided. I do think the Steelers defense is going to perform a little bit better than you're giving it credit for. Tomlin is a decent defensive coach in the playoffs. He rises on that side of the ball in the postseason. The only way they get gouged as badly as you're letting on is if their offense just does absolutely nothing. And I choose to believe Arthur Smith is not going to be foolish enough to believe in his own hype that much, not just try and pound it up the middle or on the edges with Najee Harris and get something going. At the very least, retain possession, keep that clock going for long periods of time. I do think the Steelers are going to lose this game. I agree with you. The Ravens got this one. I think they maintain possession. The defense does enough to keep it from being a one-sided affair.
The sliver of hope the Steelers have when it comes to potentially winning this game is that they've really been the best team in the NFL at defending Lamar Jackson, limiting what he's able to do on the field. But I think this Ravens team, defensively, offensively, they're peaking at the absolute perfect time. We showed them in their last matchup against the Steelers, showed discipline within their game plan. Just hand the ball to Derrick Henry because the Steelers didn't want to let Lamar Jackson get going. And I think they do win, especially since the game is in Baltimore.
God, that's going to be a fun week of discourse, though, if the Steelers defense does just lock up Lamar Jackson and the Ravens get first round. That's going to be a good one for the old NFL. That'll bolster MVP discourse in the final few weeks of the season in the playoffs. I look forward to that. Anyway, Washington taking on the Buccaneers. And for once, I'm going to pick an upset on this one. I think Washington wins. I think the Jaden Daniels hype continues into the second round of the playoffs. I have faith in the rookie. I have faith in his interior offensive line, who has played admirably this year. Their running game has not been great the second half of the season outside of Jaden Daniels. He is their offense. He's the one finding people open. And he gets the opportunity to escape around the edge, get away from the Kalijah Canseys and the Vita Veas, use his top-tier speed, only rivaled by Lamar Jackson at the quarterback position, and do some work outside the pocket. Will that be entirely with his legs? Absolutely not. His arm talent is also phenomenal. He's going to find Terry McLaurin. He is going to continue to set that franchise record. This time, though, instead of regular season receiving touchdowns, he is going to try and set the record for playoff receiving touchdowns with scary Terry McLaurin. Looking over at their defense, they've been playing much better than many of us were giving them credit for. Dan Quinn has done a phenomenal job. I kind of think he deserves Coach of the Year this season for how much that defense has overachieved, leading aside his success with Jaden Daniels. I think they are going to hinder Bucky Irving to a certain extent. You obviously are not going to find many quarterbacks in the NFL who can match up man-on-man with Mike Evans for a prolonged period of time, but the Commanders went out and traded for one of those cornerbacks earlier in the year. We are getting a Marshawn Lattimore-Mike Evans matchup. Mike Evans riding that high of getting that 1,000-yard season, stat padding his way to doing it this year. Lattimore is locking him up. He's holding him under 50 yards. He is going to take away the Buccaneers' #1 offensive weapon and make them either win elsewhere through the air or win on the ground, which I just don't think they can do with Bobby Wagner flying around and making plays in the running game like he used to in Seattle. I got the Commanders pulling off the upset. They're going to shock the world, and Baker Mayfield is going to be staying at home.
This is a really interesting game for me because I do not believe overly that much in either of these teams. The Commanders, while they have strung together a 5-game winning streak, they needed overtime to beat the Falcons. They beat the Kenny Pickett-led Philadelphia Eagles. They only beat the Saints by 1, and prior to that, they had a loss to the Cowboys, Eagles, and Steelers. Then there's the Buccaneers, who, yes, they've been 6-1 since they got Mike Evans back. The offense looks a whole lot different with him on the field, but those wins come over the Giants, Raiders, Panthers, Chargers without J.K. Dobbins, with a loss to the Cowboys in there as the one loss, and the Saints. So while they've been beating the teams in front of them, they've been beating up on tomato cans. They haven't been beating up on the greatest teams in the NFL, and they're winner of the second weakest division in the NFL. Which do you think is worse, the AFC South or the NFC South? So I think it is relatively a coin flip with these two teams. I'm going to side with the Buccaneers because I believe more in them having the home field advantage, in Baker Mayfield, in Mike Evans, what Bucky Irving is able to do on the ground. And I kind of feel like you're picking the Commanders to win because it would mean the Vikings would get to go to Detroit again versus having to go to Philadelphia.
You know, as I recall a few weeks ago when the Commanders did beat the Eagles, the first words to come out of your mouth after saying, oh, Jaden Daniels had a great game, is the lamest narrative about this game is, oh, he beat up on the Eagles without Kenny Pickett. Yeah, you've now repeated that narrative to diminish the Commanders. He still scored 36 points, had 5 touchdowns on one of the greatest or one of the best defenses in football this year. He is still
I'm not using that
fire.
to diminish
You
Jaden
absolutely
Daniels.
use that
No,
to
I'm
diminish
not.
the Commanders.
I'm using it to diminish the Commanders team because
which Jaden Daniels is
their
essentially
defense,
the offense for.
Their defense gave up 33 points against Kenny Pickett. It's different playing the Buccaneers with Mike Evans and Baker Mayfield than it is playing an Eagles-led offense with Kenny Pickett.
Yeah, I would rather match up with Mike Evans than I would with Saquon Barkley. Thank you very much. I don't care who's throwing him the ball.
That was not a slight against Jaden Daniels.
It was a slight against the Washington Commanders and their quarterback, Jaden Daniels. A hater if I've ever seen one. No doubt a Brock Bowers Rookie of the Year truther. The Commanders are winning this game, plain and simple. I don't care who the Vikings have to go visit in the playoffs, but they got this one on lock.
Next, we have the Texans versus the Chargers, and I have been saying it for a long time. The Texans are the most disappointing team who find themselves in the playoffs this year. The only time they beat a playoff team this year was when they beat the Bills, who at the time were not playing great. And Josh Allen had his 2 worst games of the season over the course of that 2-week stretch. I think the Chargers match up really well with the Texans. They have 2 elite offensive tackles. The best part of the Texans defense are their 2 elite edge rushers. It is going to help neutralize that. CJ Stroud has not really given you that much to get excited about this season. They're relying on Deontay Johnson to come in there and pair nicely with Nico Collins. You hope Joe Mixon can get things going on the ground, but this Chargers team is about as healthy as you can get. They've really built momentum over the course of the season, and I think they're going to get a win in Houston.
It's really easy to talk about Bosa and Mack. You also talk about the Morgan Foxes, the Poona Fords, who I just acknowledge because I love saying his name, Poona Ford, and the other interior defensive lineman whose name I'm not even going to attempt to say, but will flash up on the screen here. But the entirety of the Chargers defensive line is really high level. That is just going to torture the Texans offensive line. They undoubtedly have the advantage in the trenches. Looking at skill players, maybe you think Nico Collins is that much better than anything the Chargers have to offer. Personally, I think Lad McConkey is having a phenomenal year, and the difference between those two is not that substantial in terms of quality, although it's certainly different in styles of play. 2 through 3 in terms of receiving threats, I'm taking the Chargers. Quentin Johnson coming off the biggest game of his professional career with 180 yards receiving in Week 18. I kind of think he's going to roll that into the playoffs. I kind of think he's going to find a shot deep and just go for a long one against this Texans secondary. And if push comes to shove, they really can just pound this out. Now, Will Anderson and Daniil Hunter are going to get pressures on Justin Herbert. Slater and Alt are good. They're great even, but you cannot stop edge players of that caliber for an entire game. If Herbert does get sacked, I don't think he's going to lose the ball. I don't think he's going to throw an interception out. I think he's merely going to take it, accept what it is, and either hand it off 2 times and punt it, or make a play later with his arm. I don't think he's going to let himself get beat by one individual play. CJ Stroud, been getting beat up all year in the pocket. I think he is more likely to make a mistake in a big moment, turn the ball over, try and play some hero ball, and it's going to wind up costing the Texans. Also, Jim Harbaugh is not going out in the first round of the playoffs. Come on. He has not lost a playoff game in a long time. That will not start here against the Texans.
There's just the better coach team at this point. The Texans offense has been all over the place all season long. They're dealing with more injuries on that side of the ball. Chargers, they do have Joey Bosa, who's been battling the injuries, and their pass rush hasn't been all that great over recent weeks, but I think they'll do enough to win the game.
I think the interesting thing you can look at here also, I think Joe Mixon's a better running back individually than J.K. Dobbins, but J.K. Dobbins is running behind a much better offensive line, certainly a better tackle tandem than Mixon, so I think he's more likely to be productive on the ground, which will be a deciding factor in this game, given what both these teams like to do. Finally, the Minnesota Vikings taking on the Rams. The Vikings are coming off their worst loss of the season by far. Sam Darnold, worst game as a Viking, one of the worst games in his professional career, and now they got to go play one of the few teams which beat him. Well, if you watched that first game, you know it should not have been a 2-score affair. You know Sam Darnold got his face mask ripped off in the end zone. That should have been a 15-yard penalty. He should have had the chance to go drive down and try and convert a touchdown, get a 2-point conversion, and lead the game to overtime. That didn't happen. Stafford, very good at hanging up against the blitz. He is going to give Brian Flores' defense problems. Kyron Williams, productive on the ground. The Vikings have some pretty good run stoppers, but if Williams can get lower than them, which is a short, low running back, he can get under pace, get under Cashman, he's going to get a few extra yards. The Rams offense is going to be productive, but I just don't see 2 Darnold stinkers in a row coming. I don't think the Vikings are going to have to deal with the same issues of losing a tackle in the middle of this game. I don't think they're going to be constantly under pressure in the pocket. I think Darnold is going to have slightly more time than he did the first time against the Rams and than he did last week against the Lions to step up, set his feet, and throw the ball. He's not going to be overthrowing everybody. Justin Jefferson is going to be given balls he can catch and make spectacular plays. Aston is going to find himself one-on-one in deep coverage and make a play. Aaron Jones is going to get some space outside the tackles and probably get a nice little 8-9 yard run here or there, keep the chains moving, prolong some drives, and TJ Hawkinson is going to keep picking up first down after first down after first down. 2 Darnold stinkers in a row are not happening. 2 Kevin O'Connell stinkers in a row where he just gets outcoached are not happening. I know McVay's his old master, his sensei, his former boss. He is going to outdo the master here. He is going to outcoach McVay, and all in all, Vikings decisive win on to the second round.
Last week went really bad for the Vikings. Sam Darnold saw ghosts. He was overthrowing receivers all over the place. He completed 44% of his passes. He looked really bad. But I will push back a little bit on the narrative that you threw out there, that people were throwing out there, that Kevin O'Connell got completely outcoached because receivers were open and Sam Darnold just did not execute against the Lions. And I think if he executes early in that game, the crowd quiets down a lot and they're maybe able to get more into a groove as the rest of the game progresses. It kind of started bad and kept going throughout the course of the game. And against this Rams team, who beat them earlier in the season, one of the only 2 teams to beat them, I don't think it's necessarily a favorable matchup for the Vikings, but if the Rams don't rip Sam Darnold's head off towards the end of the game, the Vikings have an opportunity to win. I think this Vikings defense is still really good. They still clearly know how to put points up on the board. And while I think it is a little silly to say 2 bad Sam Darnold games aren't happening 2 weeks in a row because we've seen more bad in Sam Darnold's career than good, I do think the Vikings win. I think they get back on track. LA's not as hard of an environment to play in as Detroit, and I think the Vikings move on to the divisional round.
Yeah, I'm starting to think no environment is quite as hard as Detroit besides the old Seahawks Legion of Boom environment they had out there on the West Coast, and of course Arrowhead Stadium. That place got loud against the Vikings. I was not a fan of that home environment. Hopefully Minnesota does not have to go back there, although it seems like a inevitability if they want to make the Super Bowl.
They're going to have to go to Philly or Detroit. Neither.
Well, you never know. You never know. You could have the Commanders win. You could have the Packers win, and then someone knocks off the Lions in the second round. That could happen. You never know. The Vikings could have 2 home games to the 5 seed. These things are not impossibilities.
They're not likely.
Well, many things aren't likely.
That has been our wild card predictions. Let us know what your predictions are down in the comments below. Like the video, subscribe, use code Thicc on Underdog. Gets you bonus cash up to $1,000. Supports our channel, and we'll see you in the next one.